Welcome to the Put on Waivers Media Group, home of the Put on Raiders podcast and the Student Body Right podcast. This is your place for the best breakdowns and the best insight for those who fight on and bleed silver and black. Now, here are your hosts, Dwayne Douglas and Ryan Holmes.
And welcome, everybody, to another glorious episode of the Put on Raiders podcast. I'm your host, Dwayne Douglas, along with Ryan Holmes, and we are podcasting off the beautiful shores of the Pacific Ocean. It's raining, and again, it just keeps raining.
Wet shores.
It doesn't stop. It's just like it's like P Diddy. Can't stop, won't stop. PORSBR is our Twitter handle. It is my Twitter handle, and Ryan's is RHOLM22. So a lot is going on. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe, and also leave comments. We love the comments. Thank you guys for filling up the questions. We'll try to get to some of those questions today. Whether it's iTunes or whatever, please keep listening to the show. So free agency has started for the National Football League, and the Raiders are partaking in it. Not partaking in it or participating in it in the way we thought they would, but they are nonetheless. So I'm going to just start. I know Ryan, Ryan, you got a lot to say, and I got to say, I'll just start with this whole like Patriot Way thing real quick. I'm going to get out my system. Like, this Patriot Way is about number 12. Like, let's stop fooling ourselves, okay? Like, they got how many rings he has without them, how many rings they have without him. Does Belichick know how to coach? He's a good coach. Does Josh McDaniel know how to call a play? Yeah. Doesn't mean he knows how to run an organization. Doesn't mean he doesn't know not how to run an organization. But I know, like, I kind of worry about a coach, who just continuously grabs his own guys because he doesn't want to explain maybe his system to better players. I just don't know what the concept is. This is a league where you got to have talent. Like, you can't just like fake it. So when you get rid of Darren Waller, okay, fine. If you got 2 first-round picks and you want to go grab Musgrave or the kid from Notre Dame or Dalton Kincaid from Utah to kind of replace him, okay, I could see that. But you only got one. Maybe they're packaging some deal to do that. And I'm a little bit upset because obviously, the way some Raider fans feel about Renfrow, I feel about Waller. I'll let Ryan come in because I'm just frustrated. But I think the plan, I just don't see one. I think that's the light at the end of the tunnel. Like, if you're going to do this and blow it up, and maybe you're blowing it up because you want the option to get May or Williams, or you want to try to get up in this draft, like, I don't see the plan. And I think that's pretty. I think when you look at other teams in the league, you can kind of see what direction they're trying to go.
Yeah, the plan is not to tank and blow it up for Williams and May. I can guarantee you that, because those guys won't have a job next year. I understand the need to want to get guys that know the system, that know the route combination, that know the terminology. That's good and dandy in year 1. Now we're in year 2. And they brought in all these guys, 30, 32 guys on the roster opening day of the 53 guys that they brought in. They've jettisoned most of those guys. The plan of action, I don't know what they sold Mark Davis in the interview, because I guarantee you it wasn't, we're going to come in here, I want to extend Carr, I want to extend Renfrow, I want to extend Crosby, I want to extend Waller, and then we turn around 9-10 months later and Waller and Carr are gone, and the only thing you got back was a late 3rd round pick, when there were numerous reports they could have got a 2nd round pick before the deadline when they were 2-5 if they would have moved Waller to Green Bay. We've heard reports they got offered 2 number 1s from the Colts for Carr last year before they extended him. Like, if they were going to move on from those guys, they had a great opportunity to rebuild this franchise quickly, and they passed on those opportunities, and they didn't really get anything in return. And for me, we were sold a false bill of goods. It was, hey, we're going to move on from the quarterback. We want to build this defense. We have to give the defensive coordinator players. Patrick Graham got a pass because he didn't have playmakers on that side of the ball. And what happened? I feel like I watched an episode, I almost tweeted this, of Scooby-Doo. And Fred goes to solve the crime, and he pulls the hood off of Josh McDaniels, and who's under there? John Gruden's under there. And we're reliving John Gruden all over again, where it's like, I run the offense, I call the shots around here. Dave Ziegler, you give me what I want. Screw the defense. I'm going to score points, and if we don't win, I'm going to blame you, and I'm going to blame the defense coordinator. I feel bad for Patrick Graham right now, and I tweeted out him and Paul Gunther, the Spider-Man meme, pointing at each other. Where are these defensive players they talked about? They're down to roughly, $10-12 million in cap room. Like, they don't have enough to go out and add pieces at every level of the defense. So now they're going to rely on the draft, which Gruden tried to do, and he missed on all those picks. Well, I got news for you. I know they have 12 or 13 picks in this draft. They're probably trying to get assets to move up. Even if they draft 5 or 6 rookie defenders, how many of those guys are going to compete at a level to help this defense get to the middle of the pack next year? It's not going to happen. This defense is going to rank in the 20s again unless they go out and get a real cornerback one. They need to go get 2 or 3 interior pass rushers. They need to go get actually off-ball linebackers. Robert Spillane doesn't move the needle. Yeah, he's a career backup that played because guys were hurt. He had a decent year of stopping the run. Can't play the pass. Marcus Epps had 0 interceptions. How many times have the Raiders signed a safety that doesn't
0
create
interceptions?
turnovers? And guess what happens? They don't create turnovers when they put the silver and black on. So, they need ball hawks in that secondary. They need to go out and get a Marcus Peters. I know he's going to give up a ton of plays, but he's going to get you the football. And that's something the Raiders haven't done in a long time. And I feel like this front office kind of last year just went into it with no plan and just said, hey, we're gonna go get Adams, and we're gonna go get Chandler Jones, and we're gonna extend all these guys, and we're gonna go to the playoffs, and we're gonna have a party. And when they realized that didn't happen, they said, oh crap, let's just start getting rid of assets. Let's blow this thing up. But they didn't want to go completely and blow it up because they wouldn't have jobs. And now I feel like they wake up every day, and what's happening today is their plan. There is no long-term vision of what they want the roster to look like. It's like, oh crap, our jobs are in jeopardy. Let me go to this shiny bag of free agents over here that's ex-Patriots. These other free agents don't matter to me because they weren't Patriots. I only want to sign these guys. And I'm not against the Jakobi Meyers signing. I like him as a player. I like Philip Dorsett and the role he's going to play. But let's be honest, Philip Dorsett's going to be the 4th receiver on this team, and he doesn't play special teams. He's going to have
a Gruden move. That's a Gruden move. Yeah. 100%.
To me, he's a long shot to make the roster because if Hunter Renfrow is on this roster and Myers is on this roster and Adams is on this roster, they're only going to carry 5 wide receivers. The 4th and 5th wide receivers have to play special teams.
Yeah.
So Dorsett signing to me signals this may have an impact on Renfrow. I know they may not because they don't play the same position, but guess where Jakobi Meyers takes most of his snaps? In the slot.
Yeah.
So we talked about this at length last year about how they have a bunch of guys that want to work over the middle of the field. They needed to solve that. They did by moving Waller. I would have moved Renfrow, but they moved Waller. But now you just add Myers in, and he basically does the same thing. So now you still have the same problem. And who knows what they're going to do? To me, the plan when they took over should have been, we need to address the offensive line, we need to address the defensive line, and we need to address the defense. And what do? They ignored all of those. And then they get into the offseason, they say, we need a defense. I understand moving on from Carr. I understand bringing in Garoppolo for less money. That makes sense. But that money didn't go to the defense. Yeah. Like the Raider fans were told it would. And now if they're going to build this thing through the defense, it's going to take 2, 3, 4 years to get enough playmakers on that side of the ball to be able to get into the top 10, top 15 in the league. It's not going to happen overnight, and it's not going to happen with the pieces they have now. I know free agency is not over. They can go out there and spend money, but the impact guys, there's not a lot of them. The Raiders are going to be relying on a lot of 30, 31, 32-year-old guys on 1 or 2 year contracts towards the back end of their prime, which is what they've done for who knows how many years, and it just doesn't work. This plan does not work to build the defense. The Raiders need to be really aggressive in the draft. They need to move around like crazy to get the impact defensive guys they want. They may have to sacrifice picks out of next year's draft to move up and get them. But at this point, I don't see a vision here. I see a front office that basically wakes up and says, what should we do today? And disregard what they did yesterday and disregard what they're going to do tomorrow.
Yeah. And that's it. That's it, folks. I mean, it's probably the most problematic situation I've seen, because I knew going into John Gruden that John Gruden wasn't John Gruden wasn't a great player personnel guy. I knew that. So like, but going into this, all I heard was player personnel, player personnel, player personnel. Like I'm, you know, he worked with the Patriots, did all this. I mean, he was destined for this job. And then now he's not, because basically he's what Mike Mayock was in my mind. He's going to do whatever. There's no way that those guys, they talk about how Ziegler and McDaniels, they argue and then they come together or whatever. There's no way
McDaniels is running the show.
McDaniels is running the show. There's no way Ziegler in his right mind is saying, oh, you're right. Let's make sure we get Jacoby Myers. Let's make sure we get another receiver. Let's trade Waller and not even get a defender in return or whatever. Like, you know, I think, you know, Renfro, I think Friday, doesn't his contract become fully guaranteed? So
for next year, yeah.
For next year. So I mean, so now they're not even if they wanted to move Waller, they're not actually trading from a position of power. They're trading from a position of desperation. And if I'm another team, I'm gonna be like, oh, I'll give you a 7th round pick. Like I'm not gonna give you any real asset for him. Why would I do that?
I think if the Raider fans look really closely at these contract details, I'm a sucker for the details in the contract. I don't care what's reported by the reporters.
Yeah,
and we talked about this like a month ago, that Mark Davis, and I know Raider fans don't want to hear this, about the lack of cash flow. Like, there's no way Mark Davis has the money the Walton family has in Denver. You've seen them spending like crazy. Or in New Orleans with the Saints, with how they're able to restructure and get around the cap every year. And we talked about the structure of the contracts. If you've looked at the contracts the Raiders gave to Waller, that they gave to Renfro now, that they gave to Carr, there's not a lot of upfront signing bonus money, because the Raiders don't have the cash to do that on a large level, because there is no other revenue coming in other than what the stadium's providing. There is no other business entity that Mark Davis is a part of, like oil with Jerry Jones, where they can just go get money, or Walmart, or like the Rams, or the Broncos. And if you look at the contract structures, everything is always year to year, roster bonus the third day of the year, which kind of, it's good for the team because they don't have to spend money. It's a hard sell on the agents because they're not getting the money up front. They're telling you, you'll get it the third league year of the next year. Look at the Jimmy Garoppolo deal, which is a great deal for the Raiders. It was done well. There's ways to get out of it, but there's always ways to get out of these contracts. But it also it hurts the team because the other teams know that. Like, they know Hunter Renfrow, that money that was guaranteed last year in the contract that was reported as guaranteed isn't actually guaranteed in the third day of the league year, which is Friday. So you lose leverage when you're trying to trade those kind of players.
Exactly.
And the Raiders didn't go out and give giant signing bonuses to any of these players. Now they haven't really dipped their toes in those ones, but they can't. They can't go out and give $60 million in a signing bonus, spread it out over 5 years, lower the cap hit in year one. They kind of have to do this as you're seeing the contracts, where it's like Jimmy Garoppolo's 11.25 year one, 11.25 year two, and they kind of have to stagger it out where it's not a low signing, because they can't do what the Saints did with Derek Carr and give you like $1 or $2 million year one, big signing bonus up front, spread it out like all the other teams do, because they don't have the cash. And I didn't want to believe it when they moved to Vegas. I thought, screw that, those reports, Mark Davis will have it. Just look how these contracts are structured. It's clear that he doesn't have the liquid cash to go out and spend $100, $200, $300 million and put it in all these contracts and spread out the bonus and restructure guys and really attack this thing on the same level that the top 5 or 10 owners in the league can. Now, he can compete, but he can't do it at the level those guys are doing. So they're going to have to be shrewd with some of these decisions. I would argue that Dave Ziegler's hands are tied a little bit here because of how he has to structure these contracts too.
He can't make a mistake. So basically, when he makes a mistake, it's just like it puts him in the hole for like a couple of seasons. And then like where somebody else can make a free agent mistake and they got money, so it doesn't affect them as it affects them, but it doesn't affect them as much. So, I mean, if it takes, that's I don't care who owns the team. So yeah, I really don't. So if Mark, I know that he's not going to give up that entity over his dead body, so he's not going to do that. But if he doesn't have that money to do it, then maybe that's one of the reasons why he hired the frugal patriot people to come in and try to win and do that. Maybe that's the reason why, I can't spend money. So I mean, if they're in that, he could definitely charge money though. Because it ain't like going to Allegiant and it's cheap. There's no buy one get one free when you go to Allegiant Stadium. So if he's in Vegas with all that stuff going on, he has an NFL team. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you can't, is that why Sidney Douglas is there to try to bring more revenue into the building? Like, I don't know. I mean, but you can't function like this and be a National Football League team. You can't get. I mean, you can't win at a high level if you can't cut a check, and that's still a problem for the Raiders.
Yeah, I think obviously the TV money covers the player salaries. That basically covers you year to year. But if you look at the overall spending, that they spent the least amount of money in the AFC West last year. They were one of the 2 or 3 lowest in the AFC in terms of actual cash spent.
Mm-hmm.
Don't look at the salary cap number. Look at the actual cash that they spent in a year, because cash is king. We keep talking about that. And I think with Mark Davis, there is no way for him to really. The team's worth, whatever $1 billion it's worth, but he doesn't have access to liquidate that cash and use it. And like I said, I didn't want to believe it, but if you just read the way these contracts are structured, it's always year to year. It's always, he tries to level it out. It's always the roster bonus the next year. Like, they're guaranteeing roster bonuses for 2024 for Jacoby Myers and for Jimmy Garoppolo because they don't have the cash to give him right now. They have to spread it out over 2 or 3 payments. And I know a lot of people are like, how are these other teams creating cap room? How do the Saints get from out of the cap? You see all these contract restructures.
Mm-hmm.
It's really easy to restructure a contract. All you need to have is cash. So if a guy's going to make $15 million, like Colton Miller is a great example. The Raiders can actually do this if they want to. They probably will when they need cap room. His number's somewhere in the mid-teens. It's like $15 to $17 million. What you do is you take him down to $1 million in base salary, whatever the minimum is you can for a player with his accrued number of seasons. And the rest of it, let's just say it's $1 million. So the $16 million remaining, you write him a check right now for $16 million. Here, Colton Miller. He's still getting the $17 million the same way, but instead of giving it to him over 17 payments through a regular season, you give him most of it up front today, and then you spread out the $1 million for this year, and you pay him that $1 million over 17 payments. So the player doesn't care because the player's still getting the same money. But you have to have cash, and that takes the cap number way down, because then you take the $16 million you write that check for, and you spread it over the remaining years of the contract, or you get tricky, put void years in it, which spreads it out over even 2 more years if you want to. So the Raiders just can't do that at the same level that most other teams can, and it comes right back to cash.
And then why would you take? I mean, like if you're this is your last opportunity to be a head coach, why would you take? I know it's only 1-32, but we talk about cash being king all the time on this show. Like, if you don't have if they don't have the money to do what you, if you don't have the money, the revenue to kind of do this, then what are you trying to? What's the conversation about? Like, why would you try? What can you can't really, if your hands are strapped. I mean, are we looking at a prove it deal for Jason Pierre-Paul? We're looking at Justin Ellis. We're looking at, I'm looking at the bottom of the barrel. I mean, we're gonna bring Maurice Hurst back. We brought Brandon Faison back. There's really not much. Andrew Billing is probably gonna get back with the Raiders. We're really bargain basement. They're not a bargain basement outfit when you look at the team, as far as they present themselves.
You don't want to build your team through free agency because it's very expensive and it usually ages, but the Raiders don't have an option right now. The only other option is to hit on these draft picks, but for the 3rd rounder they got for Darren Waller, and I realize it's a new regime and the last 20 years don't matter, but what if that pick turns into Lynn Bowden or Brian Edwards or Tanner Muse or Divine Diablo? Like that doesn't change your roster. That doesn't help your team very much at all. So they need to hit on that pick. The Raiders basically need to hit on all these draft picks. You're not going to hit on 100%. They need to hit like 60 to 70% of these guys getting through their rookie deals and staying on the roster for 4 to 5 years. That's the problem they have right now, is all the guys Gruden picked are gone. There is no depth on this roster. So they're going to have to go out and sign some guys to fill holes, but you can't go season to season and just bring in a bunch of guys on a 1-year deal. That's what they did under Gus Bradley. They played halfway decent. All those guys are free agents. They're gone. You bring in Patrick Graham, signed a
Same
bunch
thing.
of guys last year on 1-year deals. Most of them are gone. They're going
Yeah.
to sign a bunch of guys this year on 1 or 2 year deals, and next year they're going to be gone. Like, there's no continuity on that side of the ball, and you're just hoping to catch
Yeah.
lightning on a bottle with a couple of signings, and it's just not going to work.
And also too, like it made even so that with that point being said, it made even less like sense to me when I looked at today. Trayvon Mullen just got signed by the Ravens. In my head, I'm like, so they cut people who didn't make any money, like
Yes.
who weren't making any. I mean, like, was Jonathan Hankins like making Aaron Donald money? Like, why? This is the part where it gets confusing for fans, because it's like, okay, fine, you're a little bit cash trapped. Maybe we're in the same boat as like the Bengals a little bit. Like the Bengals aren't. I'm not sure. I don't think they have a. I think they just the team is the team is the team. The guy who owns it is just the owner. I don't think he has any big business outside of it. But if that's the case, then why would you not like try to get the most you can possibly get out of these low paying, players who are like in their 20, 23, 24, 25. I think Trayvon Moore turns 25 this spring. Like, why would you not just hold on to those players? Keyshawn Nixon, like, try to develop those pieces, because they're young pieces that don't make a lot of money. And in Keyshawn Nixon's situation, he plays special teams at a high level.
Not when Rich Bisaccia was with the Raiders. He didn't. No, he didn't return kicks. He played punts. But I think the answer to that is a turnover, because a new coaching staff, a new GM is going to want his own players. And this isn't a Raider issue. This happens in every major sport and every major college when there's coaching changes. This happens everywhere. The Raiders haven't had continuity enough to be able to put something in place. And that's why it's rough right now. The waters are very murky, but the best thing probably long-term is to see this thing out for another 2 or 3 years. I know Raider fans don't want to hear that, and I don't want to hear that personally, but in the long run, that's the only way you can do this. You can't turn over the roster every 2 years. You can't jettison when you actually do find those pieces, the Wallers, who's moved on. Who knows where Josh Jacobs is going to be next year? That he's going to play on the franchise tag, it appears, unless they work something out. They won't franchise tag him twice. That's going to be way too expensive. So they need to work something out long term. And obviously the draft picks under Gruden didn't turn out well, other than Colton Miller in the first round. So they don't have those guys on the roster. And if McDaniels and Ziegler are picking guys to fit the specific schemes they have in place now, a new coaching staff's going to have different schemes, and maybe they're going to want different players to fit. So it pains me to say this, and I was on board middle of last season, like, let's see this thing out, give them another couple of years. But like, the plan so far in free agency shows me that there really isn't a plan.
No.
Unless it's to get now, this could all change. Like, I'm in for taking a quarterback in the first round. I know Raider fans don't want to hear that, but Jimmy Garoppolo is not the long-term answer. If they want to stabilize this thing, you have to get the quarterback position right, and you got to take your chances. You got to take your swings. Now, if they're moving Waller and they find a way to get another draft pick or two, and they get up to 3 and they get the guy they want, then it starts to make a little bit more sense. But we won't know that.
Yeah.
But they still haven't addressed the defense, and for them to say they were going to do that and then they didn't, they basically neglected it again. That's where I have a problem with how they're running it. They haven't addressed the offensive line. They haven't addressed the defense. They haven't addressed the defensive line. Like, going out and getting Marcus Epps, nice, fine player, not a difference maker. Brandon Faison, street free agent type player, may not make the roster. Robert Spillane, special teamer. It looks like they paid him enough to start. Do we know if he can be an effective starter for 17 weeks and play in this system and play the pass coverage in the AFC West he needs to? Probably not. So that's the problem I have with how they're attacking this.
Too, and also too, I mean, I would think a play caller would want to go out there and say, hey, you know what? Let me make sure my fragile, non-mobile quarterback would have time to throw over the football. And I didn't see like them go out there and even get any kind of the offensive line help. And you win the game. The Niners, so the Niners, one of the reasons why they can be the way they are and be always in it, despite having up and down quarterback play, is because of what they do on the lines. Like they can run the football against anybody, and which keeps you in the game. And they also have a defensive line that can get after you. And now they got Hargrave, so that's even more so. So like they're not even really. I mean, we're still looking at that Parker at right tackle. Like that's something that we're still same. I mean, he just when you mention the whole thing about like the Scooby Doo thing with the mask coming off, and it's Josh Jacobs. I mean, and it's and Josh McDaniels and John Gruden. I mean, it seems that way. We're still talking about like you are an NFL evaluator. Here's my point to you: would Brandon Parker play on the Patriots? No, we know why. Because he knows he needs dogs on that team. Like he needs players on that team. Like what are you doing here? Like the first thing I would ask I would ask the owner is like, dude, are we gonna be able to spend and be able to compete? Because if you can't, like, you don't want to build your team through free agency, but like you said, but like you got it. Once there's sometimes you got when you dip in there, do you have the money to get Hargraves? Do you have the money to get the star? Like the defensive unit, if you could get a Pro Bowler on each level of the defense, then you supplement the talent around them with guys in the draft. Then you can see like a little bit of a vision. I mean, we're not seeing any of it. And I think and it's kind of like how do they have that? Like, what would it take for them? How bad would this have to be for them to get fired next year? Because it seems like they're in it for like for a 3-year thing. And I think also too, I got a huge worry in my head too when what's his name Stidham left, because I was like, wait a minute, like he has actually a chance, rookie or no rookie, he knows the playbook and he has a chance to play, because the guy in front of him, Garoppolo, doesn't play 17 games ever.
Yeah, but I don't think Stidham wanted to take a backseat to Jimmy Garoppolo, and he knew Garoppolo was coming, so he was like, I'm out. He had to know that was coming. I think the point that needs to be made here is the lack of cash. And we don't have access to the financials, but you can't shrink the cap number in year one on these deals without the signing bonus.
Yeah.
The Raiders had 43 million, but they've chewed into most of that because the year one cap charges for some of these contracts, they're not able to drive it down with the giant signing bonuses that other teams can. So, they're taking, Jimmy Garoppolo is like $16 million, which is perfectly fine for a quarterback. Jacoby Myers is somewhere in the $7.5 million, but these start adding up, 7.5 here, 2 or 3 million for a couple of these roster pieces, 5 million for this. And now the Raiders they're not going to be giving out long-term deals. So now when you think about it, they still have to sign all these draft picks. That's going to take a lot of the salary cap. And then if you want to add these mid-level defenders that are, 29, 30, 31, these guys are going to come like on 1-year deals, but there's no way to lessen those cap hits. So it's 1 year, 4 million for this guy, 1 year, 5 million for that guy. Boom, you're out of cap room. Like the Raiders aren't going to be able to go out and add 7 or 8 veteran defenders that are halfway decent and try to plug all these holes. They just can't do it because they're not giving out 3, 4, 5-year deals on these guys. They're giving out 1-year deals at this point in free agency, or maybe a 2-year deal for the right guy. And they chewed through cap room very, very quickly. Where I know we talk about the 49ers defense, but it took them 5 or 6 years of hitting on multiple
picks,
several defensive picks. Like to think the Raiders can be that, they can't. But they haven't gotten any help on the defensive line for Max Crosby, and that was a huge concern. And for me, let's say they pick at 7, I don't think Will Anderson's going to get to him.
No.
Jalen Carter is a giant question mark character-wise, and I know he would fit great
in this
on
defense,
the field,
he would.
But I'm not sure that's the kind of guy that would fit within the Patriot way character-wise. And that's for the scouting department to figure out, to do the interviews, do the backgrounds, and figure it out. But my guess is he's not a Patriot way guy. Yeah. So I don't know if Ziegler and McDaniels would go that route. Now, who's the other impact defensive lineman that you would take in the top 10? Like, I don't really see one, unless you want to say Nolan Smith. But are you going to take Nolan Smith with Chandler Jones on his last year of the contract? And does that really change your defensive line next year? I don't think it does.
Yeah. And are they on a little bit of the outside as far as getting that true impact player? at 7. So they kind of got to move up a little bit. Nick Kukowski is still as a free agent, so they could always bring him back too.
I
Since
mean,
we're doing
you
that.
can move back, but the problem is to move back, there has to be someone wanting to come up.
Come
Like
up,
it's
yeah.
really easy to say, yeah, I'm going to
Like,
trade back to
nobody wants to come up
15.
to 7. No.
Yeah, unless someone really wants one of those offensive linemen, and maybe the Raiders just take one of the offensive linemen and just plug in Paris Johnson or Skoronski and roll that way. But again, that's not helping the defense. Like they have to fix the defense. Jimmy Garoppolo can stay healthy for 17 games and they can throw the ball around the yard. It will not matter if this defense is still ranked 25th in the league and giving up points. The defense had to be the priority, and the defense so far has been an afterthought.
Could you imagine, like, it has been an afterthought. I don't know how Patrick Graham has more patience than I am. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I know he's getting paid. I know he has that Yale degree, all that stuff like that. But like, just to have, they can't. I mean, they were going to go to next day of free agency, and there's the Zach Cunninghams, the Deion Joneses, people like that are available. Denzel Perryman is still available. Corey Littleton's still available. That's surprising.
If the season started today, Amik Robertson or Brandon Faison would be a starting outside cornerback.
And I was looking, and you mentioned that, and you mentioned that part too. Is like, is this quite? I mean, this is pretty like the worst. Just linebackers. This is one of the worst linebacking cores in the history of the franchise. I mean, this is pretty bad.
That's a lot to say because there have been some very bad ones.
I mean, and then
under
like
contract right now,
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And is there
bad?
Is there an impact inside linebacker at 7? No. Is there one at 38 when they pick in the second round? Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah.
Not definite. So even like I said, even if they go out and they draft a bunch of defensive rookies and they try to plug them in, like they're not all going to pick up the system year one.
Yeah.
They're not all going to learn the terminology and the assignments year one. Like it's a growing process. So they need veterans. And for all the expatriates that McDaniels and Ziegler want to give to the offense, like where are the players that know Patrick Graham's system that can come in? Like they're just not going to bring them in. Like here you go. Like I hope Marcus Epps is really good. His PFF coverage grade is one of the worst in the NFL, but he's a physical guy. He doesn't miss tackles. Like you're gonna have Merrick and him back there, and maybe Faison, and I mean Nate Hobbs. Well, technically Nate Hobbs should be in the slot. So now you don't even have an outside. You don't have one outside starting quarterback corner, let alone two. And I said back in the fall, I think it was like the middle of the season. I said I wouldn't be surprised if they went corner in round 1, and now the Raiders probably are gonna, if they don't go with a quarterback and find a way to move up, they're going to take a corner at 7. They're almost likely to take one there, and the kid from Oregon would be great. I'm a huge Christian Gonzalez fan, but as good as corners are, it won't matter if you can't get the quarterback. So,
I mean, like I said, I like to be truthful on this show. So, and Ryan and I just give me the truth. Like we can't like lie to you and be like, okay, we got it, they got it. I know they got it. But these moves don't make any sense. It seems like he's like, you know what, we're not going to be good, and but at least we'll score points. So we'll lose 27-37. Like I feel like that's what they're headed towards right now.
Which was the plan they had last off season, clearly.
Yes.
And then it's kind of like let's run back. Let's run back last season, but let's add a couple of pieces and take a couple of guys away, and let's try to do it again.
Let's get less durable at quarterback. Let's go out there and and get rid of one of the guys who can definitely win. I mean, we're looking at a Niner game where the Raiders play the Niners. I mean, Waller was a handful for them. Like they're trying to hold on for dear life just to cover him. That's one of the best defensive teams in football. So I mean, I don't know. I really don't know. As far as free agents who are available now, since we're going to Filene's basement, like what are guys? Is there guys that you think? I mean, starting with who would kind of fit this team as far as the linebacking core or defensive line, offensive line, who are like tier 6 free agents. Because that's where we're at. This is like,
I don't have the list in front of me off the top of my head. I'd say Levante David or Devin Bush. They need a linebacker that has speed, that can run, that can be a factor. And those guys can still do that. Robert Spillane's a downhill thumping inside. He's basically a worse version of Denzel Perryman. Like, he's not going to change this defense. He's not going to be good in pass coverage if you have to play man coverage. And it's interesting because towards the end of last year, once Abram was off the roster, the Raiders played a ton of man coverage. And you would think, hey, if we're going to play man, they need linebackers that can run and cover and play man. Spillane's not that guy.
Yeah.
So he's probably a 2-down player. Like, I don't think he's going to play in the nickel. He's not that kind of player. So the Raiders still have needs there for fast guys that can run sideline to sideline. They still need an interior pass rusher, someone on the defensive line, but they really need corners. Like, they really need to go out and figure out how can we get a corner in here.
In a lot
and maybe
of corners.
maybe that's Rock Ya-Sin. Like, I'm not against bringing back Rock Ya-Sin. I thought he played fine last year before he got hurt. He wasn't a liability out there. He didn't give up big catches. He was a sure tackler. So I'd have no problem if they can find a way to bring him back and just, as the corners start coming off the board. Bradford went off the board today, or Bradbury. I thought that he was a possibility. Byron Murphy could have been a possibility. He came off the board. So now you're looking at, some lesser younger guys that haven't played a lot, or you're looking for aging veterans that are trying to hold on. I don't know off the top of my head, but I can't think of an available free agent that's that can walk in and be cornerback one right now.
Can I run through some names for you?
Sure.
It seems like he's older. He'll be older, but Marcus Peters is 30 years old. So I
would be okay with that because at least he'll get his hands on the football.
Exactly. So we got Peterson, William Jackson, Shaquille Griffin, Bradley Roby, Ronald Darby, Anthony Brown.
It's not a good list.
It's not a good list. Bobby McCain, Troy Hill from the Rams, the great Anthony Everett. We got Eli Apple, which because Eli Apple will probably end up on this team.
He's not going to sign with this team after what happened the last time they tried to sign him when it didn't go through.
Yes. Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Prior to the Bengals, he was supposed to be a Raider.
Yeah. PJ Williams.
It's a list of serviceable guys. None of them are difference makers, other than maybe Marcus Peters because of the ability to create turnovers. But
Greedy Williams.
Yeah, he got beat out in Cleveland. So, like, these are guys that teams didn't want, that were currently there, older guys or more expensive guys that teams wanted to move on from. So the Raiders are going to have to draft several corners, I would think, in this draft, at least two, if not two plus a safety. They seem to be okay at the safety spot with Merrick. They have Merrick and Epps. Clearly, they re-signed Teamer. Palomau is still there. And you can always go get Deron Harmon before training camp if you want to, as another veteran to plug in. So, but they have to address the corners. They have to address the interior defensive line. And it's just concerning that this regime, now we're not done with free agency. They haven't done the draft, but they did a full cycle free agency. They did a draft. And I'm not going to give them a pass for last year. They're the ones that traded the pick for Davante Adams, right or wrong. And it appears it was a very good move at the time. But that doesn't give them a pass for not filling enough holes in last year's draft. And then they've gone through the first 2 or 3 days of this year's free agency, and the same holes that were here when they took the job are still here. Like they haven't addressed any of them. They're not building inside out. They're building random skill position players to help out Josh McDaniels. They flipped over the quarterback, but they haven't brought in really anyone in that's been a real difference maker other than Adams. But Adams was the best receiver in the league when they got him. So, like, I'm not going to give them credit for Davante Adams being really good.
Davante Adams could play in Siberia and still be the best receiver in football. But you made a good point about the fact that they have not improved on any of the deficiencies the team has had. Like that's the most, to me, that you talk about a damning thing, that's pretty damning. Because, like, you go into the season, you know that the Raiders struggle on offensive line and defensive line. There's no impact players been added. Like, we can talk about Chandler Jones, whatever, but they don't have an impact player on the defensive tackle position. The guys they drafted aren't that. So
Law Nichols wasn't that either.
He wasn't that either. So, I mean, it's how's that Bubba Sparks song go? It's getting ugly. It could be.
No, they can right the ship. They could come back in the next couple of days, surprise us, but they're running out of cap room. So they're going to have to move some players.
Well, they have left
Mark
right
Davis
now.
is going to have to write some checks. I want to say it was like $15 million after Myers. That's before they re-signed Johnson,
Yeah.
Teamer. That's without Faison's number. Like those numbers aren't going to be big, but it might be a million each. And now you're looking at, 12 million instead of 15 million.
Moving Renfro for a draft pick frees up how much?
If they do it before Friday, I think it's a little over 10 million. And if they do it after Friday, then they take a $7 million cap hit. So I think it's like 4.
Oh, so
4 or
he's
5.
he's probably gone.
I don't know. It'd be tough to move on from him because then what did you really accomplish by moving Waller and Renfro and all you did was add Myers? Like that, you went backwards if you do that. Like they got to hold on to some of these guys. So I would expect Renfro at this point to stay based on Waller leaving. I don't think they're going to move on from both of them.
Yeah.
But the problem is when you start looking at the roster, like what can they do to help this defense? Because we keep coming back to the same thing. Like we were told the defense was going to be addressed. The only thing they can really do now is Mark Davis can write a check to Colton Miller to open up money. But a lot of the impact guys are gone. Like they're going to have to hope that they can hit on some of these mid-level free agents and they have a good year. But the problem you run into is when you get that guy in a 1-year deal for $5 million and he plays way above that, guess what? You got to pay him the next year or else you're right back at the drawing board. They're not answering any long-term questions here. They have to do that through the draft. And I'm still on board as saying last year, I don't believe Dave Ziegler is the messiah when it comes to drafting it. Dylan Parham didn't play good down the stretch. He's going to be,
and they still.
Are you convinced Dylan Parham's getting a second contract from the Raiders based on last year? Because I'm not.
I'm not.
He's got a chance to. I'm not convinced Thayer Munford is going to be a starter this year. I'm not convinced Britton Brown's going to be on this team. We don't know what Zamir White's going to do. I'm pretty sure that Butler and Farrell didn't do anything last year. So, like, before we anoint them as the greatest drafting duo in the history of drafting, like, let's actually see them get players that actually make an impact on this roster.
Yeah, no question about that. And what do you do with Andre James? Like, I mean, is Andre, if you had plans for Andre James, do you have plans for Andre James? Andre James is not going to move to guard, right? So, if you're going to, I mean,
there was a report that they're looking at extending him. I saw a day or two ago which means the plan of moving Parham to center is, like I said, they woke up today and they decided yesterday's plan wasn't good. Let's try this new plan. Like they can't get out of their own way.
Yeah. This is like when kids are doing something all over the place and they just need a parent to come in and say no. Like they need somebody to come in and say no. Like, you know what I mean? Like what, or somebody just say, hey, what the F are we doing? Because like that makes like if you like that is the most confusing move in the world if they exchange if they do that with James. Like that would be and not that James doesn't deserve the money or deserve the extension, but you would think it wouldn't be here with the Raiders because you drafted because Parham can't continue to play guard. Like he's not really that good at guard. When you impressed, nobody was like impressed with him at guard. Like he was all right.
He gave up. He was near the bottom in offensive guards of pressure rate given up. Now, he's a young player. He has a chance to get better. The biggest jump these guys make is usually from year to 1 to year 2. So he could surprise us, but he's going to, if anything, he's going to be a solid player. I don't see Pro Bowler. I don't see a guy that's going to be the anchor of this line for 10 years. This is not Steve Wisniewski type player. This is a guy that, you're going to try to get 4 years out of, and then when the 5th year comes, do you give him a contract extension? Like, it depends on how he progresses. Like, he has a chance to be solid, but right now he's not that. And I think he should go over to right guard. They've been playing him at left guard. So we'll see if they leave him at left guard or they move him to right guard. But again, they still need a couple more starters on the offensive line. And you can't just say, well, they have 12 draft picks. The Raiders are not going to have 12 rookies start on this roster next year. And if they do, this is a giant disaster.
Yeah. I mean, they're getting there.
Maybe 3.
Yeah.
Maybe 3.
Yeah.
Maybe 4.
Yeah.
Not more than that.
Yeah. You're looking for about 3 or 4 guys who can start in a draft class. And then hopefully you can develop some more. But like, yeah, you're not going to have 12 starters offense and defense in this draft coming up here. So yeah, I mean, like I said, we did have that Bizarro show that never aired because the next day they got Devontae Adams. But I mean, this is like
Chandler
Jones. But I mean, this doesn't seem like so they have the ability, but like I don't know if you're sitting there with it sounds like they don't have the capital to really do it. I think the capital they're getting for these picks seems like the Cardinals we missed out on the deal with the Bears. Now we have to work with the Cardinals, and the Cardinals are asking for a whole lot.
I don't know if they're going to get what the Bears got. Like, you're only going from 3 to 7. I don't think it's going to take 2 1s, 2 2s, and a player to move 4 spots. Because who behind them is really trying to come up? Like, who wants that pick? Maybe Indianapolis wants to move up 1 spot.
Yeah.
I don't think Detroit's trying to come up. I don't think Seattle's trying to come up. So, like, and behind them does Atlanta really want to go up there? Probably not. They're probably going to ride with Ritter for another year. Carolina already went up there.
Yeah.
Tennessee's at 11. Like, when the Cardinals start really thinking about this, the only logical place they can move is 7 if they want to move out of that spot, or 4. So it's 4 or 7. They're not falling out of the top 10. Because right now they could get the 3rd best player in this draft, probably the best defensive player in this draft if they want to go with Will Anderson or Jalen Carter, depending on how they feel about it.
They might.
I have a suspicion if they stay there. Like, if you're the Raiders, do you just say screw it, screw the Henry Ruggs, all these issues they've had, Damon Arnett off the field, and just bite the bullet and take Jalen Carter? I don't think they can do that.
I mean, but remember, but you remember Barmore. Was it
Christian Barmore?
Christian Barmore had a lot of I can't say same issues, but had issues with the Patriots, and he was able to. I mean, it's the Patriots, so it's not the Raiders, but he turned out to be a pretty good player, and they took a chance there. But they can't do that. This regime does not have the I mean, Andy Reid could do that all day and all night. Kyle Shanahan could do that all day and all night. They can do that in Philly. They can't do that. That would be incredible if they did that. But I mean, if they do trade the 3, and you're sitting there saying, I know we need a quarterback, but Will Anderson's right here. That could be something. I mean, something to think about. Maybe to throw a bone to Patrick Graham. I mean, who knows? But if they go to 3, they're taking a quarterback.
They're taking a quarterback if they go to 3.
Yeah, they have to take a quarterback. They got to get a quarterback.
I mean, if they wanted to go that route, wouldn't you just stay at 7 and take Nolan Smith? I mean,
you could.
Better athlete, way better speed. Now, the better football player right now is Anderson. But if you're a scout and you're saying upside 3-4 years down the line, there's a chance there's a higher ceiling with Nolan Smith.
Yeah.
There's a lower floor. He fits the 3-4 that the Raiders are running. But I don't think that they would do that to move up to 3 to take him. And he might be there at 5. Who knows? Because if quarterbacks go 1 through 4, if someone goes to 3, then he's there at 5. Or maybe Seattle just signed Draymond Jones, so they're probably not going to take Carter. If I'm Detroit and I'm Dan Campbell and I have that locker room and I'm a tough guy, I'm taking Jalen Carter if he's at 6. Like, plug him in on that defense next to Aiden Hutchinson. So, because the Raiders now you're the Raiders and you have, let's just say, 3 quarterbacks, Carter and Anderson are off the board. Like, what are you doing at 7? Like, one, you're probably trying to trade back, or you're taking a corner. You're taking the best corner on the board. If you believe that's Christian Gonzalez, you're taking Christian Gonzalez.
Yeah.
Or you're taking an offensive lineman.
Yeah. Makes sense. All right.
And Josh McDaniels will probably take Paris Johnson and get rid of Colt Miller next year, because that's kind of what it looks like they want to do. I'm saying that jokingly, but it wouldn't surprise me if they took Paris Johnson or Skoronski and then they moved him over to left tackle next year and created more cap room that they can
or just
around. But they might not even be here next year. So a lot of frustration, just voicing our opinions. Now, like I said, this could all change. Like, they may surprise us. If they do find a way to get the quarterback of the future, then I'm okay with the route they're going. But if they don't, if they end up, taking a couple of players in this draft and signing a couple more guys and running out the 25th ranked defense next year, then this whole 2-year window was a giant disaster.
That's right. I mean, this has been like, you waited all, what was it? Like, they waited all this time to do this. That's what somebody texted me today. And shout out to all my Giant fans. I used to live on the East Coast. I live in California now. And boy, they were texting me a storm today. Yo, what's up with Waller? Yo, how good is Waller? I'm like, it's pretty freaking good.
Now imagine Like, this is just so fitting it's happening to Mark Davis. And, you know, when
Woo.
they hired McDaniels, everyone was kind of like, what, really? And I tried to buy in. I wanted to buy in.
Yeah.
This regime hasn't given me any sense of hope that I should buy in. I tried. I tried for a year.
Mm-hmm.
We're into 2 to 3 days into free agency. Like, but
second free
for
agency.
all the expatriate coaches and all the chances they got and how it's failed miserably everywhere, and they all went out and did the same thing and tried to bring in all these expatriate players, and it never worked anywhere other than in New England. Is it only fitting that Mark Davis tried to relive that after it's failed for everyone else, and then it basically the same thing is happening to him that everyone would have predicted when he hired Josh McDaniels? So the fact that they keep trying to do it with Patriot players just keeps leading them to believe this isn't going to work because they don't have number 12, as you started the show saying.
They don't have number 12. I mean, it's funny. They don't, like, everybody says Patriot way. Like, did he leave his notebook in New England? Like, you know, I remember Ty Law playing for the Patriots, right? Then you remember like a guy like Willie McGinnis playing for the Patriots? Like they had
Lawyer Malloy,
Teddy Bruschi,
Willie McGinnis,
the McCourty brothers. Like, I mean,
Richard Seymour. They had dudes on defense.
They had dudes on defense. Like, I mean, like it wasn't just like, I mean, it wasn't just like, you know, Bill just trying to just be. He was able to build a balanced team. Part of it was because Brady didn't always take the highest money or the highest money available. But I mean, I remember them having. Trust me, it was painful to live on the East Coast when that whole thing. They were giving away, when I was young, they were giving away tickets for the Patriots. You couldn't. Nobody could want to go to those games. Now you can't buy one to that godforsaken place.
Doesn't it seem odd that? Well, one, Jimmy Garoppolo is a guy who's had a lot of success with teams that can really run the football.
Yes.
Wherever he's been, they've run the football.
Yep.
The Raiders are going to run the football next year.
What?
Isn't it surprising they've spent so much capital on skill position players, but they haven't beefed up the offensive line or the defense? If that's the style of football they want to play, they have to have a defense that can somewhat stop the other team, and they have to have an offensive line that can run blocking and keep the down and distance and not get all these penalties and get into 2nd and 15 and 2nd and 20. But they keep going out and getting skill position players.
Yeah,
that's a concern. They don't have a tight end on this roster. Jesper Horsted and the undrafted kid they took out of Utah last year, they signed as an undrafted free agent. Those are the only 2 tight ends on the roster.
Yeah, and I guess the Harvester Sports are clowning the Raiders now with 87. They have an 87 jersey with Gronk photoshopped into it now. So everybody's trying to chime in. Why don't you?
He's not coming.
He's not coming. And Harvester, why don't y'all just why don't y'all try to win?
Harvester. Is that the car?
That's the car thing. That's the car.
David Carr's nephew or son? I think it's son.
Something like that. Yeah. So,
yeah.
A lot of.
Well, anyways, I hope I go to sleep and I hope I wake up tomorrow with the Raiders have signed an impact
defensive player.
But please, I won't hold my breath.
Yeah, don't hold your breath. Don't hold your breath. All right, Raider Nation. We're gonna go. Ryan, thank you for dealing with the pain with me as well. But yeah, it's not been a good look for the Raiders here. So we'll see what happens there. I will get this show out immediately so we can get it out before it goes in the vault. Before it goes in the vault. So all right, Raider Nation.
All right, take care.
Good luck, guys.